All right,
Okay, John, you're live.
welcome everybody. We will give people a few minutes or maybe a couple minutes to just get joined up here since we just went live. And we will get straight into the content after that. So put on our tap dancing shoes and kill a little time. And in about 30 seconds, we will get started. Already got a good number of folks joining up, so shouldn't need to wait too long at all. Not to preempt any intros, but Shelby, Carl, where are y'all calling in from today?
Calling in from very gray San Francisco.
Classic.
Yeah.
Calling from a not so gray, bit sunny Marin over the Golden Gate Bridge.
Rub it in, Carl.
Hey,
You escaped to Marin for a reason. I understand.
Well, I'm in beautiful New Jersey, but also pretty great today. So it is what it is. Anyway, we are a minute or two past the hour, so let's get started here. We can kick off with just some welcomes and housekeeping, and I will take the lead on that. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're at. Welcome to our webinar on the Chief of Staff's Guide to Scaling AI Maturity. I am John Levitt. I'm co-founder of Elvex and COO, and I'll be your host today. Before we dive in, a few housekeeping items. We're scheduled for about 45 minutes today. We will include a 15-minute Q&A session at the end, but we're also going to try to answer questions in real time as they come through. So if you do have questions, please use the Q&A function, not the chat. That'll help us keep track of questions that are coming in and just keeps things a little bit more organized for us. Do feel free to use the chat function if you'd like to introduce yourself, who you are, where you're from, where you work, what you're curious about. Any of that stuff is free game and always good to get a sense for who's in the room. The session is being recorded, and all registrants will receive a link to the recording and the slides as soon as we have it available and ready to send out, hopefully within the next day or so. So stay tuned to your inboxes for that. And let's get into the content. So today we're fortunate to have two exceptional speakers joining me. Shelby Sly from Ridgeline, who will share some insights on why the Chief of Staff role is pivotal in AI implementation, and Carl Miller from the Grin Labs, who will present frameworks for the maturity model and measuring ROI in AI initiatives. Let's start by introducing ourselves, our companies, and then we'll get into the current state of AI. So Shelby, why don't you kick us off?
Yeah, thanks so much, John. Hey, everybody. It's great to be here today. So I'm Shelby Sly. I am the Chief of Staff to Ridgeline CEO, and I also lead our strategy and operations team. For those who don't know, Ridgeline is a startup building the enterprise SaaS platform for the investment management industry. We're founded by Dave Duffield and headquartered in Lake Tahoe, although, as I mentioned, I am coming to you from my remote location in San Francisco.
Hi, everybody. I'm Carl Miller, co-founder and also head of AI at the Grin Labs. We help companies with AI adoption. So not think of it more as like adoption across the company and how to use tools and build efficiencies across the organization. Excited to be here. As I mentioned, I'm calling in from Marin, California.
Thanks again to both of you for joining us today. I'll bring us home here. So again, I'm John Levitt, co-founder and COO of Elvex. And if you're not familiar with Elvex, Elvex is a platform that enterprise companies like Boston Globe, WordPress, Embark, and many others use to deploy generative AI across their workforce. Our platform centralizes access to all of the leading AI models, ensuring that your data won't be used for model training and providing a really consistent and compliant experience built specifically for enterprise needs. We make it really easy for anyone in the company, regardless of your level of experience or expertise, to connect your data, your documentation, and build powerful agents and workflows, all in a no-code environment. So again, making it super easy for folks to get started. And our customers tend to see really good gains in overall adoption because of the ease of use and connectivity that we just talked about here. Really has the potential to transform how businesses work. So very exciting for us. Ultimately, we're trying to help companies get more efficient, automate routine tasks, make better decisions, produce better outcomes, and hopefully, allow the business to reach new levels of success. So that's about us. And on an individual level, we get really excited when we see people at our customers just figuring out how to do things that they either didn't have the time or skill to do previously. And that's the power of AI, can really just level up and transform the way that things work. So with intros out of the way, we'll get into what we're doing next. We're going to dive into the current state of AI in enterprise. We're going to talk about frameworks and how to understand the maturity model or your journey with AI. And then from there, like, where does ROI come into the equation? How do we think about it? And then we'll wrap with some discussion around tools and how to evaluate what's right for your business. To get us started on the state of AI and the maturity imperative, we'll be sharing some data from the Chief of Staff Network's Chief of AI report over the next few slides. And diving straight in, wanted to start here because despite all the hype and potentially the overhype, the vast majority of organizations that have implemented AI are reporting that they are meeting or exceeding the expectations that they went in with. Only 13.8% reported AI underperforming their expectations, which is really encouraging, especially to see that, like, we know there are people out there that are not sure how to get started and thinking this is a really big investment. And do we have the people? Do we have the team? Do we have the expertise? I want this to give you some confidence that investing in your own AI maturity is worthwhile, even if the journey seems tough at first. It is possible, and people are seeing success out there. One thing that comes up often with our customers and prospective customers that we're talking with all the time is insecurity about where they fall in this AI maturity model. So building on the last point, we'll talk more about this in the conversation today, but the graphic here really matches what we're seeing day to day. Most companies are still figuring things out, but mostly everyone is doing something. They're getting involved, they're getting active. That 19% of companies that are not using AI is shrinking every single day, and it's going to get down to near zero, probably in the not too distant future. So if you're one of those folks out there that's feeling really insecure about, like, oh, we're so far behind, there's always opportunities to get further ahead. But I think most people, most companies are really in that core, like, trying to figure it out, trying to get to the high ROI and the maximum potential. So the point is, like, get started, push forward. You'll get to the top of that bar, with a little bit more time and leadership. One thing that we really wanted to focus on in this conversation that is pretty undeniable through our experience, and we see it every day with our customers, the companies that have the strong leadership and leadership that is encouraging and enabling people from that top down, these are the companies that are seeing the best results. The strategy of, we're going to let everyone choose their own tools and take their own classes and educate themselves, and, like, they'll figure it all out. That is not a strategy, I hate to inform you. What we prefer to see is, yes, let's organize people. Let's figure things out. Let's see where the opportunities are. Let's see where the roadblocks are. Let's unblock as much as we can, but also let inspiration bubble up from the bottom. But the strong leadership can't be replaced, and we can't expect that people will just find their way to maximum success completely on their own. The good thing in this chart that we're seeing here is that the data is showing that broadly, executives are finding a significant impact and importance when it comes to AI initiatives. So the next step, I think, from here is knowing your audience, your internal audience, your employees, and where can we expect to have the most buy-in, the most resistance, the most existing engagement, so that we can manage and lead the organization to success. That's a really, like, knowing your audience is a really, really important piece. So I'll pause here for a moment. And Shelby, Carl, I'm sure you both have experience here. How does this match, like, the representations in the graph here? Like, how does this match to what you're seeing in your organizations? Are there hotspots? Are there dead zones? How important is leadership? Whatever you want to talk to here, go for it.
Yeah, I'll start. I mean, I absolutely resonate with the notion that just democratizing access to tools and kind of throwing them out to your people, it's great, but that's not a strategy. We at Ridgeline, I'll get into this in more depth later in the presentation, but in the past 2 years, we've tracked not only AI usage, but also AI sentiment amongst the different teams. And it was really interesting last year when we were more focused on just AI adoption, kind of giving people access. We had a couple of teams who truly from day one were in there experimenting and saying, hey, we can't imagine our roles without this. So some of the areas like customer support, some of our other customer experience teams, as well as our people, our HR teams, very quickly we're like, please, more of this. We're seeing so much value. And we had some, more skeptical teams who just given access to things, we're not the ones who were going to immediately reimagine their life without it. Even on our product and engineering side of the house, it took more of that tops down expectation setting, some more required trainings, for example, to really start to get that AI spark lit for them. And I'll speak to that in more depth, but definitely resonate with this chart here.
Yeah, and
Carl, how about for you?
I'll just echo what both of you have already shared is that absolutely a non-negotiable. I mean, we're talking to companies all the time and this confusion and there's all this market noise around, oh, what's AI about? How's it going? And it's coming in, all these different stakeholders from all different angles. And the non-negotiable one that we would say, and John, just to echo what you're saying, is that executive level leadership has to be on board. And I have a few stories about that I'll share later, but just wanted to plant that one again. It's good to repeat stuff, and I think that that's the non-negotiable one. So
That's a great lesson for those that are thinking about how to introduce AI to their business as well. You've got to repeat it. It's got to be a constant talk track. All right. So last data slide for me here, and we're going to put up a quick poll in Zoom while we talk through the data here. But recognizing the potential impact of AI is one thing. Measuring it is a complete other thing. 32% of companies using AI report not measuring its impact at all. And without measurement, it's really hard to demonstrate the ROI, which is important for getting budget internally. It's really hard to know which strategies to lean into or to make informed decisions about future investments. So the measurement aspect of this really has to develop as the maturity model advances as well. I think it's really important to think about what we value and how we measure it. There's a common tendency to think about how can we use AI to save time and be more efficient, right? That's the top thing that's reflected in the chart here, but this is just part of the equation. The opportunities I get most excited about is like, how can we improve the quality of our work? How can we how can we improve the productivity? How can we improve revenue production? I think there's way more opportunity for most companies to grow versus cut. And I think like reframing that conversation can also be really, really important when you think about from a leadership down perspective, how are we messaging the importance of the work that we're doing here to the broader organization? What are we inspiring them to build? So thinking through all of that when it comes to measurement, it's not always easy, right? It's not always easy to measure this stuff, but the more we can kind of get toward that is, I think, really, really important. So let's see. We have the poll result. The poll results. 67% of respondents on the webinar today are not really measuring yet. 11% are looking for productivity gains, 19% looking for time savings efficiency, 3% looking for financial impact. So there you have it. Thanks to you all for engaging and responding in the poll there. All right, so we will keep moving right along. Shelby, you're Chief of Staff at Ridgeline. Can you tell us a bit about, in your role, the AI decision-making process and, who else you've seen getting involved and how does it match to the data that we're seeing here?
Yeah, absolutely. No, so first of all, shout out the Chief of Staff Network. I'm a member. It's a great organization. I love this data that they've pulled together here. And as we can see that for 17% of companies, the Chief of Staff is really in the mix and actually selecting those AI tools. I'll be perfectly honest, at Ridgeline, I was not the decision maker. Like the majority of these companies, our CTO made the call, but I find the stat so interesting and revealing for how it just really indicates the nature that is the AI challenge for companies, that this is not just a technology problem or a software implementation problem, but ultimately a really ambiguous, multifaceted problem with unclear ownership. And so in organizations, or in many organizations, where do those problems typically land? The answer is hopefully obvious given the nature of this webinar. It's often with the Chief of Staff. So why the Chief of Staff? Why this moment? We can go to the next slide here. So we're at a really unique moment for Chief of Staffs, I think more than anything. It is really, AI is really reshaping how our companies operate, right? It's everything from how we make decisions to how we build products, how we engage with our customers. There's nothing that's not really being touched by this change. And yet the how of AI transformation, I think, still feels so ambiguous in a lot of organizations. And I think just based on the poll results as well, it looks like that's, echoed across the group that we have here today. And I think that's where the Chief of Staff role really becomes pivotal, right? So, we sit at the intersection of all of these areas that you can see on the slide here. We're close to leadership priorities, but also embedded in the daily reality of how work is getting done. The other, I think, salient point for me is that we have the trust and horizontal reach to spot patterns, where there's duplication, where workflows can be reimagined, where AI can really unlock capacity for folks. And so I think this is a moment that plays to our strengths. It's not just a project, but it's really a capability shift is how we think about it at Ridgeline. And I think that chief of staffs are built for exactly that kind of work. So while it's a very ambiguous problem, it's most of all a human problem that we're going to dig into a little bit more here.
All right, let's play. I think I'm next here, right? So if you go on to the next slide. So number one, I feel like I'm with my people because this is like when you talk about some of the stats that John shared, around 65% of the companies still trying to figure stuff out. And then the poll that was just taken in terms of 67% of us right now in this room are not measuring ROI or not measuring AI within their organizations. This is what's happening. Like, this is our feeling. This is totally, we would always say like 2/3 of the companies or the contacts that we that we work with have not figured things out. And so let me walk you through, I know that there's a poll here. So let me walk you through what we mean by these levels so that you can better indicate in the poll exactly where you're at. So number one level, and why, let me back up a little bit. So why this is important, these levels of maturity within your organization, it's not like a checklist. This is really more about a foundational way of thinking through what the journey could look like. It's a template to help your executives better understand, and the team and the journey and the company or organization overall better understand where they're at in the journey. So level one, I like to call the fog. The way you know if you're in the fog in level one, which isn't a bad thing, it's where probably 67% of us are on today's call, is that there's no strategy. There's no direction. There's some what we would call noise. There's a lot of ad hoc usage and probably some really great results from that ad hoc usage, but the leadership probably doesn't know what those results are, and there's not a lot of sharing about what those results are. So that would be level one. For those of you that are looking at the level one right now, that would be informal adoption. Level two, I like to call the playground. And so everybody's building, nothing's necessarily connected yet in terms of strategy, but there's a sense and an urgency and a fun around building and experimentation. There's probably, whether they're LVX assistants or custom GPTs, with ChatGPT, for example, there's a lot of building and awareness of, oh, this is actually something that's starting to gain traction. And then level three, where you're looking at the strategic integration, AI is part of the business. It's on the roadmap. Not a lot of level three organizations out there. Level four organizations, if you can answer the question that I think is a good indication. Yeah, so there we go. These are the results. This is perfect. But level four, so there's none of us in level four, and I didn't necessarily expect that there would be based on the other responses. But level four, one of the questions I like to ask the C-level team is, how are your customers how is their behavior going to change based on AI? And if they don't have a firm understanding or methodology in how to answer that question, then most likely they're not a level four organization. So just wanted to highlight there, what these levels are, and then we're going to go more specifically and tell a few stories around that. But one thing I want to hit again is that it's the area that is non-negotiable is C-level involvement. And I'm going to slow that down one more time, and we're going to talk about it. But what I want to do is everybody to reflect for 1 second. What we believe is that there's three types of leaders. There's either the leaders that are like, okay, my industry is changing and everything's going to change and I need to have AI throughout my organization. So think about that. Is that your leader? The second type of leader is the type of leader that's basically like, okay, this is a technology deployment. This is going to go into tech. This is CTO, CIO type of environment. Therefore, that's where it's going to sit. It's a software deployment. So that's the second type of leader. Now, what I can tell you about the first type of leader and the second type of leader is what we're seeing is massive success with the first type of leader that says this is changing the industry. Second type of leader, a lot of these initiatives stall out. And then the third type of leader is the fun one. Here's a simple question to ask them. Oh, how do you use AI? And if they don't get excited out of their skull about stories and telling about AI, then they are not, they're in either camp, they're in the camp number three if they don't get excited out of their skull. Essentially, they're going to give you a blank stare and they don't use AI. And that's the type of third level or third type of CEO. So just think for a second of where your leadership, how you would categorize them. And let's sit with that for a second. Okay, let's go ahead to the next slide. The reason why I bring that out is because here's some common pitfalls. And the number one by far, again, is lack of leadership buy-in. So let me give you another example of the opposite of lack of leadership buy-in, which is leadership buy-in and how that comes alive. And my favorite story about that is one of our clients, the San Francisco Giants. I was in a training session with the San Francisco Giants, and the CIO of the Giants stops me in the training. I'm like, oh shoot, I'm in trouble. What's going on here? And the CIO says, Carl, I have a story about this. And we were talking about working with AI as a thought partner within the organization. And the CIO, in front of everybody within the training session, says, hey, I have a story. And he tells a story about how he had a personal review with one of the people that works for him. And to do that review, there was some challenging news within that review, but to do that review, he basically put it in ChatGPT. He knew that person loved Star Wars, and he basically translated the review from Jedi to Jedi. And that person felt so seen and so supported and so alive after that review that it completely changed the conversation. But what also changed in that training and in the room was everybody started popping up. Now that their CIO had shared about how he had used AI, everybody started to share. So I just want to share that, it's not one way of showing and demonstrating leadership buy-in. It's a conscious awareness that this is important to reinforce over and over and over again, just like I've been doing with the leadership buy-in stuff today. All right, so I'm not going to go through each one of these right now. There's a slide later that we're going to actually have you take a picture of that talks about these common pitfalls and what some of the remedies or solutions are around them. But let's go ahead and jump into the next slide and talk a little bit more about Ridgeline.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll get into kind of the meat and potatoes of this example here. So at Ridgeline, over the past 2 years, we've really, I think like many folks on this call, been focused on scaling our AI maturity internally. And so, I think, which is the common place to start. Like many of you, we started with AI adoption. One of our top line company goals last year was all in on AI. So let's get people curious. Let's get them in there experimenting and using tools and just kind of give them access. This year, one of our top line company goals is really about unlocking AI leverage. So AI that's embedded more in how we operate, how we're solving problems, how we're building, all of that stuff. And at Ridgeline, we really think about this transformation in 4 key layers. So our product, our systems, our processes, and our people. Our strategy has really been, again, to move beyond that low-hanging fruit into real capability building within the organization. And so last year, we started by really rolling out those foundational tools. So in particular, OpenAI, Cursor, and more recently, Glean, that helped build trust in AI as a co-pilot. And we had AI champions within teams that were there to really help drive adoption with their peers. But we know, and we knew kind of, especially going into this year, that tools alone weren't going to be enough. We needed to drive scale. We wanted to launch then a functional AI leadership program. So in that case, we were identifying change agents across departments who are tasked with rethinking workflows and defining where AI can really 10x these teams. So to just get very practical here for a moment with all of you, these leaders start by establishing context for their areas. So really digging into what are those key workflows? Where is the friction within these areas? And what I mean by areas is like, software engineering, program management, product management, areas where we might have people from across teams kind of falling into one centralized bucket based on the type of work that they do. Once they have identified those opportunity areas, it's evaluating then whether our current AI tools that I just mentioned can close that gap. Most of the time, yes. We hope it's mostly yes at this point, leveraging tools like Glean or custom GPTs. But when needed, they also explore new technology or tools or automations in partnership with our leverage engineering team to help close those gaps then for teams. We track all of this in a pretty structured and transparent way for each of those functional areas, so folks can go and kind of see what's going on. But you can see on this slide here that as part of this program, it is not a small commitment. We really believe that to drive the level of impact that we want to see, it is going to take a meaningful amount of time from these leaders. And I'll just add that we are not doing this perfectly yet. We are just a few months into this rollout, and this is, where we ultimately want to be, where we know we need to be to see the type of change that we want to. But we're still really on our way there. And so we've invested more in the structure within our organization as well. We created a VP of AI role and built out the leverage engineering team that I mentioned. So engineers really embedded within functions to prototype those agents, assistants, and automations to solve the real business problems. And at the end of the day, we've set a high bar. So we are aiming for 100% functional engagement across these teams, not just that individual usage. We firmly believe that our AI maturity isn't at the end of the day going to be about who's using ChatGPT, although that's certainly where we started along our journey, but it's more about the systems and teams that are materially better because of AI.
So Shelby and I met at a dinner a few months ago, and the way she was talking about this, I was like, "Oh my God, your Ridgeline is so far ahead of the game." She's like, "Really?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, oh yeah." But it's nice to know that things aren't perfect there. Of course not. But okay, so let's talk about like practically what this looks like. We talked about level one, how there's a lot of ad hoc usage, how the journey hasn't been shared essentially from the leaders of the organization to the organization. There's no governance. There's really no strategy. So this is a really exciting time for the chief of staff. Because as Shelby mentioned, you see things across the organization. You have a high level of authority. You have those touch points into the team, into the leadership, but also into the leaders, other leaders, and individual contributors. So in so many different ways, we think that at that point, your job is to help bridge between what's happening within the organization and the leadership's lack of knowledge in a lot of ways. So it's about curiosity and confidence in sharing what's happening. And so it's this beautiful, like level one is a beautiful space to be, especially for the chief of staff, because you can help be that bridge throughout the organization. So I'm interested, Shelby, in your experience, what were some, because essentially this is, I know beating a dead horse or whatever, but it's about bringing the leadership along for the journey if they haven't felt that yet, if they're not the ones that are completely leading it yet. And so I'm interested from you, what are some of the challenges that you had in bringing your leadership along the AI adoption curve?
Yeah, I'm with you, Carl, that while level one is beautiful, the transition between level one and two, oh my God, it's just messy, right? So, I think any person on this call who is a chief of staff or kind of sits in that cross-functional operator space knows how fun it can be to sometimes need to bring along an entire group of leaders at the same time with a shift in technology and adoption here. We are lucky that at Ridgeline, the majority of our executive team always sat in the pretty strong, pretty firmly, this is going to change the industry. We all need to be using this camp. But we have a couple leaders who are not so much in that camp. So just to share a little bit more of an anecdote, at Ridgeline, as I said, we're headquartered in Lake Tahoe. We love our skiing and our mountain references. And so when we were tracking AI usage last year across ChatGPT and Copilot in particular, we would bucket people based on their levels of usage into three categories, which was the green circle category, if you were somewhere between 0 and I believe 10 messages a month, the blue square category, if you were north of 10, but less than 50 messages a month, and then black diamond, you're north of 50, you're in there, you're experimenting with these tools, you're leveraging them in your day-to-day. That's where we want you to be. Most of our executive team was in, yes, we love our skiing metaphors. Most of our executive team was in that black diamond camp, very strong users from the jump, really setting the example well with their teams. However, we have had a couple leaders who were so firmly in the green circle, like with essentially 0 usage. We have one leader in particular he's a phone call guy. Like any time of day, if he wants to workshop a problem or make a decision, he's calling you on the phone. Doesn't read email, barely looks at Slack, the toughest nut to crack for any sort of technology transition that we were going to be undertaking. And I'll be very frank, I think people will appreciate this. We had some extremely contentious leadership conversations in board meetings last year around how aggressive our team needed to be as leaders to really be setting the example and setting expectations with the team. Ultimately, in about think it was Q3 of last year, kind of fall of last year, we did align that, hey, it is not enough to simply be telling your team to use this stuff. You need to be in it too, like absolutely living and breathing it and really imagining the art of what is possible with these tools, kind of employing lead as a verb versus a noun to really see that change. So happy to report that we have seen much stronger adoption, more consistent adoption across some of these players that I'm mentioning. And at the end of the day, we're more aligned on its importance. But that transition from level 1 to level 2 was definitely not an easy one.
I appreciate your transparency there and your, in some ways, vulnerability, right? And I sort of see things. I mean, it's not like you are almost like deep into almost the way you're describing it. You were deep into level 2 in some of the work that you were doing, because the way we would describe level 1 to level 2 is just to get that recognize AI potential, create some basic policies, have an AI task force, introduce some helping the leaders communicate the journey, which it sounds like you were pretty far into. And our sort of, I'll give ourselves a little bit of a plug here, is that we feel that we can take most organizations from level 1 to level 2 within 3 months, with some moxie, with some real, as long as the leadership is bought in. If they're a second or two, a 3 leader, then that's a whole other thing. Then we have this little fun little trickster aha moment thing where we have to have the C levels, he or she, basically have an aha moment of AI. And so sometimes we have a little fun trick book not trick book, that's the wrong word for it, but a playbook for them to have their aha moments. But anyway, getting back onto level 1 to level 2, we feel it's a pretty quick uplift, because it's paying attention is the main thing and putting together the framework for success. So let's go ahead and move on to level 2 to 3. And I'm cautious of time too. I know that we're, I think 15 minutes left to go or so. I don't know if we're running over, but from level 2 to level 3. So from basically the playground to the engine room, right? And so really what we're talking about here is, in some ways, getting everybody on board. And ultimately, yes, that involves training, but the big thing that I think may have Habib and many others talk about in the industry is most companies underestimate the need for change management. This is behavioral change, and people love to work how they've always worked before. People love to think and believe and do things like they've done in the past. And what probably a lot of us have in common in the room is we all have a certain ability or like of AI. It just became intuitive for us. But that turns into an ability bias, where we don't necessarily see those that are struggling with it and whatnot. Like Shelby, sort of like you talked about some of your leaders that weren't necessarily on board. Ultimately, obviously, and I know that you were doing the work here, is it's about validating their experience and understanding and having curiosity around where they might be stuck. And then also from the top level, making sure that leadership is saying that this is important, similar to what Toby recently did with Shopify, right? Hey, this is a very public, important thing that's going to help us differentiate and really, level up our company. So that's from a level 2 to level 3 in the playbook, that's probably one of the most important pieces. And then as we move and from level 3 to level 4, it's really about evolving this into our strategy and creating a cultural transformation, because this is business transformation. It's not just people transformation, it's business transformation. It's breaking apart our business models. It's getting a better understanding of how AI is impacting our business model, from our customer segments to our revenue streams, and really taking a new look. Like one of my favorite quotes, and I forget who it's from, it's probably from all of us at this point. If you're working off of a business plan or model that's a year old, it's completely irrelevant as far as I'm concerned. AI is touching all of our ecosystems, and we really need to reevaluate how we're doing business. And so then moving from that level 3 to level 4, and the thing I said earlier is level 4, executive leaders, they are answering the questions at this point: how is AI going to affect the behavior of my customer and my partnerships? And they're actually embedding that into their work. So Shelby, just a quick question. How did Ridgeline evolve your strategy to focus? I know this is really about outcomes, and that's part of what we're talking about with these levels. more on outcomes rather than just adoption. Because adoption is one thing, but as we move into these more mature levels of 3 and 4, it's really about outcomes as well and value. Like we're always talking to our leadership teams about value, what value can bring, how quickly can we measure and share and communicate this value that we're bringing to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. And not an easy conversation or an easy transition either. I think about this time period as when kind of at the end of our last fiscal year, so in January, we were transitioning into the new one and setting our goals for the year. And we knew as a leadership team kind of inherently that we needed to be spending more time on AI. Like I think at Ridgeline we have a little bit of this sentiment all the time that we're somehow like behind. And so there's this feeling of like, oh my gosh, like we're not doing enough in these areas. And we have a really great internal AI Tiger team that was, helping to guide that conversation and the ones pushing oftentimes to say we need to be like carving out and dedicating leader time, which was the impetus for then that AI functional leaders program. So we spent a lot of time during some leadership on sites at the end of the last year, really kind of debating like how much time. And let me tell you, it is not easy to tell a CTO that, hey, you need to dedicate up to 50% of some of your best people's time to this initiative. But ultimately, we, are very bullish on this and believe that this is necessary to create the level of change that we want to see. And so, starting with defining those expectations of functional leaders is how we also started to then put more pen to paper on, okay, what are the types of then company level goals and kind of guiding lights that we, are looking for those outcomes. So again, not perfect. A lot of the OKRs that are written to measure our AI success are, being driven by that functional leader program. And, some parts of the company are still more hotspots than others, but that's kind of how we made that sort of messy transition into where we are now.
I love
But
that.
if I could respond to one point there, I think for those in the room here, really important to recognize which level you're at here and what that means in terms of metrics, goals, and how you're measuring things. Like it's going to change as you move up the maturity model. And uh, one mistake that I would say I see people in market doing sometimes is trying to go from level one to, okay, the decision on the investment that we make right now is at the expectation of being at level four. And it just doesn't jump that quickly. And you have to build in that time to actually go through the process, do the work, scale up, measure the stages appropriately so that you can get to the point where, okay, maybe it's 6 months in, maybe it's 12 months in, maybe it's 2 years in. You are now at the point where you're fully matured and generating the value and ROI that you ambitiously want to get to, just like anything else. You have to put in the work just like anything else, and you have to measure the right steps to get there.
I love that, John. And one of the things that we believe is, for example, if you're about to be or you're hitting like that level 3 area, but you don't have 80% adoption throughout the org, there's a real possibility that you're really playing it more of like a level 2, or that you might fall back into a level 2 organization. It's work, and it's hard work, and it's repetitive work. And so for chief of staffs right there, one of the things I would say that would be really helpful, those 2 pieces of advice as you move through the journey, that we found because of your unique position within your organization, is translate AI wins into leadership language. So margin, efficiency, speed, like that's, something that's really important for them to hear. And the second one is when you're working with other leaders and ICs within the organization, build internal accelerators. So encourage bottom up contributions that amplify the top-down initiatives. And so I think that that's the piece of the puzzle, is that yes, there's a lot of great ingenuity and innovation, but the more those connect to the top-down sort of strategic initiatives, the more that you're helping the organization tell the story of value.
All right, we're a little bit long on time here, but I think it's okay. We've been answering some questions along the way. So, Carl, let's get into the common pitfalls and how to lead past them.
Yeah, so yeah, and I'm just conscious of time here, and I just want to highlight a few of these here. So limited AI literacy. Let's be careful just that, training doesn't equal that you are moving through the levels of the organization. Training is one aspect of it. Like we already touched on, really behavioral change is really the more sort of the more challenging one in some regards. And then making sure that there's value derived within the organization. So getting into the AI literacy, there's lots of training companies out there. There's lots of training going on, but let's not get like pulled away from that. And people need to, especially leadership, need to feel real outcomes. and people need to feel that, not sit in classes, right? So one of the things about training is like we push people into environments that sometimes they're a little bit uncomfortable with, but that's the real mechanics of change happen is that there's, oh, here's some real outcomes. They felt it. It's a felt experience versus a head experience. So I just want to put that in terms of when we talk about AI literacy, some of those things. And then the other thing, and I'm going to go out on a limb here and just say, yes, we need ROI measurement, but maybe not lead with ROI measurement. Bryce from Moderna, he's been quoted as saying often that his CEO had that aha moment. It's a category, let's call him a category one CEO that's had the AI aha moment. But as soon as they had that aha moment, in their preparation for, he was going to a trip to Asia and he had to do some prep for meeting notes, and somebody said, oh, use AI. And within that aha moment, essentially what happened is the CEO said, forget about ROI within the organization for right now around AI. It needs to be everywhere. It needs to be everywhere. So just want to say that there's different stages and different times that ROI is important. It's important to deliver and talk about value, but we don't need to measure everything like so precisely for, at the early stages. So that would be another area of like a pitfall. And then, each one of these has this thing. Again, you're not going to get anywhere without the lack of leadership buy-in. And so, for those that are interested in that journey and how that works, I'd love to chat because it's one of my funnest areas to play in terms of shifting C-levels mindsets around how the value of AI in their org. But just conscious of time, just wanted to touch on a few and highlight a few of those top level ones. Take a picture of this, of course, to make sure you have this information.
We'll send the slides as well. One of my favorite things that I see our customers doing on the AI literacy side is literally just setting up hackathons, like get the entire company or business unit and just give people access to things and let them experiment, let them explore, and force them, as you were saying, Carl, to just like get the dedicated, and you too, Shelby, like get the dedicated time scheduled, force people to do it, and you and they will probably be surprised with what you come up with. That's not the only path, right? There's lots of training and other aspects that have to build into it, but it's a really fun way, I think, to like start to accelerate some progress and engagement. All right, couple more slides to go, and then we'll be pretty much right on time. Just looking quickly at tools. So unsurprisingly, ChatGPT is the most used tool or model or whatever we want to call it here. But there's clearly a variety, and it's very interesting. You'll see people across businesses have different preferences, and it may be because some tools are better for some jobs than others, right? So there's a lot of competition. There's, every other week, it seems like there's a new model atop the leaderboard. And so it can be overwhelming to stay attuned with all of that. I think the good news is like tools like LVEX, humble plug here, give you access to multiple different models. So you don't have to make that decision up front. But it is important, I think, to think about the tools that you bring into the organization and how they're working for and with the people that need to solve certain challenges and problems. So there's a whole nother webinar that we could probably do on like which tools, which models are most appropriate for which types of users and which jobs. But we'll just end quickly here, just looking at like, all right, so how do we even start to select options? What are the options for us? Pretty much AI is embedded in every software now. So you can end up like trying to purchase and license every single AI subscription add-on to Salesforce, to ZoomInfo, to HubSpot, so on and so forth. Gets really expensive. You don't have a lot of customization around it. Nothing really ties together. There are certain things that you'll want to do at that level because they can go deep on a certain problem, but it's probably not the right solution for like how do we transform the business? How do we get everyone working together on these problems? Some companies might choose to roll their own, build their own. I would just caution, this is a rapidly changing technology. The pace of change is such that you have to treat it as like you're building a company within the company. Most businesses aren't prepared to do that. If there are things that you build, it should be super strategic and value add to the business and solve something that you can't get off the shelf. And then of course, like the model providers themselves, there's ChatGPT Enterprise, there's Anthropic's Enterprise option, so on and so forth. Again, there's like a little bit of an ecosystem constraint with some of these. So certain providers are going to want you to be all in on their platforms, and the interoperability with other platforms that you may already be using across the business, that can present some challenges. So something to just be aware of and look at as you're kind of going through some of these. And then, of course, there's lots of AI platforms on the market. If you're choosing a platform, I would hedge towards something like an LVEX, which is clearly built for enterprise. There's lots of other like consumer AI platforms. When you're introducing these tools into your business, there's probably legal review, there's probably security review, there's lots of things that enterprise requires that not every company is built to solve. So it is actually really important to look for the enterprise readiness of the tools that you're bringing into the organization. With that, we are exactly at 1:45. I think we may have a question or two that we can jump to if we have an extra minute or two from the presenters here. And I'll read the question that we have from Paul that we haven't gotten to yet. It may not be obvious, but the presenters have done a very good job of answering questions that have come in just naturally without even reading the questions. But this one we'll read because it's live. We are a people-first company with all of the public conversation about AI replacing people. What is your messaging to your team regarding implementing AI initiatives? I've heard rumblings among my circle about this being concerning with administrative staff throughout many companies. I have a take on this, but Carl, Shelby, would defer to you guys if you'd like to take the first crack.
Yeah, at Ridgeline, we have a set of core values. Every Dave Duffield company has the same core values. The number one core value that we have is our employees. And so we've tried to be very clear through our messaging and what our CEO has said in particular, that at the end of the day, our goal is to maximize the potential and the value of all of our existing employees, but also to not shortchange the conversation. Like by not saying that, hey, over time, we probably won't need to hire as many people, but that does not change the nature of how invested we are in our employees. And where we always see them as the last mile for everything that we do. So I think it's a nuanced answer, but I think just continuing to emphasize, the core value of employees first helps kind of, gauge the conversation.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, trust and transparency are what it's all about, and that's what it's this, how people can work with change. And so the way that Shelby's organization, Ridgeline, is dealing with this is spot on and what we would always recommend.
I think the best businesses are going to figure out how to harness this technology to take the really, really talented people they have and allow them to do way more than they can do right now. That's the way that we, would prefer to see our tools implemented in market. But I think we're a couple minutes over, so I think we have to let our panelists go. If we didn't get to your questions, apologies. We'll try to do it async offline. Thank you everybody for attending today. Hope you enjoyed. Like I said, we recorded. We'll share the recording. We'll share the slides, and we'd love to hear your feedback. If you liked it, if you hated it, if you want to see more, let us know. It helps us get better and produce better, more interesting content for y'all. So thanks everybody. Thanks Shelby. Thanks Carl. This is great.
Thanks, John and team.
Thanks so much.